My name is Michael Hartman. I am 48 years old, and for most of my life, I believed silence was strength. I believed that keeping your head down, doing your work honestly, and staying loyal would protect you from betrayal. That belief cost me everything. I wasn't born powerful. I built myself quietly, brick by brick, while louder men took credit for the noise. For 20 years, I worked at North Shore Holdings, a firm that prided itself on discipline, loyalty, and family values. That's what they called it. Family. I stayed when others left. I covered mistakes that weren't mine. I worked weekends without complaint. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, funerals. I told myself it was temporary. That sacrifice would one day be seen. It never was. The meeting that ended my career lasted less than 10 minutes. No raised voices. No accusations. Just polite disappointment. The most dangerous kind. Michael, the CEO said gently, we've decided to move in a different direction. Different direction. That phrase erased 20 years of loyalty. They blamed restructuring. They blamed new vision. They blamed everything except the truth. The truth was simple. I had become useful but inconvenient. I knew too much. I remembered too much. And I wasn't flashy enough to protect. The man who took my place sat quietly at the end of the table. Evan Ross. Younger. Sharper suit. Perfect smile. A man I had personally trained. As I stood to leave, Evan avoided my eyes. That hurt more than the termination. Because betrayal doesn't always come with cruelty. Sometimes it comes with cowardice. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights. I didn't drink. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I replayed the past. Every late night. Every warning sign I ignored. Every time I stayed silent to keep the peace. I finally understood something painful. Loyalty without boundaries is self-destruction. That realization was the first lesson. But lessons mean nothing without action. Over the following weeks, I watched from a distance. North Shore started slipping, slowly. Deadlines missed. Small errors ignored. Clients uneasy. The systems I had designed were still running. But without understanding. Evan was confident, too confident. He didn't know that the stability he enjoyed was built on decisions he never made. And that arrogance would become his weakness. I didn't rush. Revenge doesn't need speed. It needs timing. I didn't want chaos. I wanted truth to surface. Naturally, publicly, and without my fingerprints. Because the most powerful revenge is not destruction. It is exposure. And as I watched Evan step into a role he didn't earn, one thought stayed with me. The higher a man stands on borrowed ground, the harder the fall. That night, for the first time in my life, I stopped being loyal to people who never deserved it. And that decision changed everything. Losing a job does something strange to a man my age. At first, people think you'll panic. They imagine desperation, anger, begging. I felt none of that. What I felt was clarity. When routine disappears, truth gets louder. Every morning, instead of rushing into traffic, I sat by my window with black coffee and watched the city wake up. I listened. I thought. I remembered. And memory is a dangerous thing when you finally decide to use it. I knew North Shore skeletons. Not scandals, worse than that. Shortcuts, silent compromises, deals that were technically legal, but morally fragile. I had warned them once. Years ago, they told me, this is how the world works, Michael. Now I smiled at that memory. Because the world works exactly how you design it to. I didn't call lawyers. I didn't call old colleagues. I called no one. Revenge planned and noise dies early. Instead, I opened an old hard drive. One I had kept out of habit, not fear. Project timelines, internal emails, decision chains, nothing illegal on its own. But together, a map, a quiet blueprint showing who made which choice and who pretended they didn't. I wasn't angry at Evan anymore. That phase had passed. Anger is clumsy. I was focused now. One afternoon, I visited a small cafe near the river, the kind no executives ever notice. I met Daniel Mercer there. A former compliance officer. They fired him 5 years ago for budget reasons. He laughed when he saw me. They finally did it to you too, he said. I nodded. We didn't toast. We didn't curse. We talked like surgeons reviewing a patient. Daniel confirmed what I suspected. North Shore was preparing for a major expansion, new investors, international exposure, which meant audits, which meant scrutiny. And scrutiny hates shortcuts. I didn't need to push. I only needed to remove protection. here's the lesson most people learn too late. Power isn't about attacking. It's about knowing when to step aside and let gravity do the work. I quietly resigned from every advisory board I was still part of. I declined every informal consultation request. They didn't notice at first. Then small things began to fail. Minor systems slowed. Reports came back unclear. Clients started asking uncomfortable questions. Evan tried to fill the gaps. But confidence without foundation is just theater. And the audience was growing restless. One evening, I received an email from North Shore. Polite, friendly. They wanted my input. I deleted it. That silence spoke louder than any reply. Because when you remove the man who knows where the wires are buried, the lights don't go out immediately. They flicker. And flickering makes people nervous. I wasn't trying to destroy the company. I was letting it meet itself, honestly, without filters. Because the real revenge wasn't watching Evan fail. It was watching him realize that the success he inherited was built by someone he never respected enough to protect. And when that realization finally arrived, it would come with witnesses. That night, as I closed my laptop, one thought stayed with me. The most dangerous man is not the loud one who threatens. It's the quiet one who steps back and lets the truth walk forward alone. And North Shore? They had no idea how close they were to the edge. People don't notice silence until it's too loud to ignore. North Shore's boardroom was full, yet strangely hollow. Reports kept arriving late. Numbers didn't line up the way they used to. Meetings ended with more questions than answers. And that's when whispers begin. Not accusations. Not yet. Just doubts. Doubt is the most expensive emotion in business. Evan tried to move fast. He hired consultants. Young, confident, expensive. They spoke in polished phrases and colorful slides. But slides don't understand history. I did. Every shortcut North Shore ever took had a context. A reason. A man who made the call and accepted the risk. That man used to be me. Now the risk remained without its handler. One of the consultants asked for archived operational data. Just routine, they said. North Shore's legal team hesitated. That hesitation traveled. It always does. Because fear leaves fingerprints. Meanwhile, I became invisible by choice. No LinkedIn posts. No public commentary. No industry insights. Let them wonder. People are far more creative when filling gaps with their imagination. Daniel called me one evening. They've triggered an internal review, he said. I smiled. Internal reviews are never internal for long. Someone always leaks. Not out of malice. Out of self-preservation. When survival instincts wake up, loyalty sleeps. Here's something no one teaches you. Organizations don't collapse because of enemies. They collapse because everyone suddenly wants to be the last innocent person in the room. I didn't need to accuse anyone. I only needed to let the room echo. A journalist reached out. Not to me. To Daniel. A careful one. She asked about historic compliance patterns. Daniel didn't give her names. He gave her timelines. Timelines are neutral. They let readers decide who looks guilty. The first article was gentle. Almost kind. It used phrases like legacy practices and evolving standards. North Shore released a statement. Standard. Reassuring. Empty. Stock dipped slightly. Just enough to be noticed. Evan called an emergency meeting. This time, voices rose. Blame bounced. People spoke faster, not smarter. And that's when I knew they had entered the echo room, where every sentence comes back distorted, where certainty dissolves. Late that night, I opened my laptop again. I didn't send documents. I didn't leak files. I sent one email, anonymously. Subject, for your records. Inside, a single decision tree from 10 years ago. No commentary. No explanation. Just proof that someone, somewhere, had once understood the consequences. That someone was me. And now that understanding was missing. The next morning, the second article dropped. This one wasn't kind. Names were still absent. But patterns were clear. And patterns terrify investors. Evan appeared on television. He spoke confidently. Too confidently. A man defending himself against questions no one asked yet. That's when the audience senses blood. I watched from my living room. No satisfaction. Just calm. Because revenge isn't joy. It's balance. And balance was finally shifting. One thought crossed my mind, sharp and cold. They didn't fire a man. They removed a stabilizer. And now the structure was learning how gravity works. The third article didn't make headlines. It didn't need to. It landed in inboxes that mattered more than newspapers ever could. Investors don't react to noise. They react to patterns. And North Shore's pattern was beginning to look familiar. The board hired an external firm. Global. Expensive. Unemotional. They didn't come to accuse. They came to measure. Every meeting after that felt heavier. Words were chosen carefully. Emails were reread before being sent. People stopped joking in hallways. That's how you know fear has arrived. Evan began staying late. Very late. He wasn't fixing systems. He was rewriting narratives. The problem with rewriting narratives is that records don't forget. Files don't argue. Timestamps don't defend. They simply exist. I was asked, indirectly, to speak. Not officially. A mutual contact called. Just background, he said. Off the record. I agreed. Not because I wanted revenge, because truth, when delayed too long, turns toxic. I didn't provide documents. I provided context. Why certain decisions were made. Which risks were known. Who approved what. I never said Evan's name. I didn't have to. Here's the lesson hidden beneath all this. When you replace experience with confidence, you don't get innovation. You get exposure. The review uncovered nothing illegal. That disappointed Evan. Illegal things can be denied. Gray areas can't. Gray areas follow you. They show up in investor meetings. In audit notes. In footnotes that no one reads, until they do. Evan was asked to present a remediation plan. He worked all weekend. Monday morning, he stood in front of the board, polished and prepared. Halfway through, someone interrupted. Who designed the original safeguards? Silence. Evan named a team. Wrong answer. Another voice. Who removed them? Longer silence. This time, Evan spoke carefully. We believe they were no longer necessary. Belief is not evidence. That's when the external lead asked the final question. Who carried institutional memory for those systems? No one answered. Because the answer wasn't in the room. That evening, Evan finally reached out to me directly. Not through HR. Not through lawyers. A simple message. Can we talk? I waited. Not out of cruelty. Out of symmetry. Because when I had asked for clarity, I received politeness. Now he would receive the same. The board didn't suspend him. That would have been dramatic. They reduced his authority. Temporary oversight. Shared decisions. A soft demotion. The most painful kind. I watched as North Shore's name slowly changed tone in conversations. Not scandalous. Cautious. And caution repels opportunity. One night, alone, I asked myself a question. Was this about revenge or correction? The answer surprised me. It was both. Because revenge without purpose leaves emptiness. And justice without patience never arrives. Evan's second mistake came quietly. He tried to protect himself. He redirected responsibility downward. Someone noticed. Someone documented it. And documentation, once again, did what anger never could. I closed my laptop and stepped outside. The city looked the same. But systems don't collapse all at once. They lean. And when they lean far enough, they F. All on their own. Power changes people. But losing power exposes them. Evan's days became shorter, even though he stayed longer. He arrived early, left late, and achieved less in between. Every decision now required approval. Every approval carried hesitation. He wasn't leading anymore. He was surviving. And survival makes people selfish. The mistake he made wasn't loud. It never is. He shifted responsibility quietly, adjusted reporting lines, framed decisions as collective agreements when they were anything but. He believed diffusion would protect him. It did the opposite. Because once people realize they're being positioned as shields, loyalty evaporates instantly. Someone saved emails. Someone recorded meetings. Someone prepared for the day blame needed a home. That day arrived sooner than Evan expected. The board called for a closed session. No agenda shared. That alone told everyone what it was about. Evan walked in confident. Walked out smaller. They didn't fire him. They offered him options. Options are how organizations remove people without admitting mistakes. Resignation with dignity. Advisory exit. Mutual agreement. He chose the one that preserved his name. It didn't preserve his relevance. 2 days later, I received a call. This time, it was official. The board wanted me back. Not permanently. Not publicly. They wanted me as a temporary stabilizer. Clean the systems. Restore confidence. Leave quietly. I listened. Then I asked one question. What happens to Evan? A pause. Then the answer. He steps aside. That mattered. Not because I wanted him gone, but because accountability finally had direction. I agreed. Not out of pride. Out of completion. Because revenge unfinished becomes regret. Walking back into North Shore felt strange. Familiar, but altered. People stood straighter when they saw me. Conversations paused. Respect returned, not loudly, but instinctively. They hadn't missed me. They had missed what I prevented. I worked quickly. No drama. No speeches. I restored safeguards. Reassigned authority. Rebuilt memory into systems so no single man could ever again be mistaken for the structure itself. That was the lesson. Organizations fail when they depend on ego instead of design. Evan cleared his office quietly. We crossed paths once. No words. Just eye contact. There was no hatred there. Only understanding. And that was enough. The press never mentioned my name. They didn't need to. The story was already complete. North Shore stabilized. Investors relaxed. The crisis passed without scandal. From the outside, it looked like recovery. From the inside, it was COR. Rection. On my last day, I declined a farewell. I left the way I had always worked. Quietly. Because revenge doesn't need applause. And lessons don't need announcements. They need consequences. When everything was over, nothing looked broken. That was the most honest part. North Shore didn't collapse. No sirens. No public shame. From the outside, it appeared as if the company had simply corrected its course. But correction is a quiet form of justice. I returned home on a Friday evening with no deadlines waiting for me. No messages asking for approval. No systems depending on my memory. For the first time in decades, my mind was silent. And in that silence, I understood something I hadn't before. Revenge doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like relief. Evan resigned officially a month later. Not in disgrace. Not in headlines. Just a short announcement. Pursuing new opportunities. That phrase follows men who fall without noise. He didn't call me. He didn't need to. The system had spoken clearly enough. North Shore offered me permanence. A senior title. A visible role. Authority. I declined. Power had already taken enough from my life once. That was the final lesson. The one no one teaches you early enough. Never become so essential that you forget to remain free. Months passed. The company stabilized fully. New leadership. New structure. Stronger safeguards. They would survive. But they would never again mistake confidence for competence. That lesson had been expensive. One evening, I received a short email. From Evan. No explanation. No defense. Just a sentence. You were right about loyalty needing boundaries. I read it twice. Then closed the laptop. Some acknowledgments don't require replies. I started consulting quietly. Selectively. Only where my experience mattered. And where respect came before results. People listened now. Not because I demanded it, but because consequences had proven my value. Looking back, I realized I hadn't destroyed anyone. I hadn't exposed secrets. I hadn't raised my voice. I had simply stepped aside and allowed truth to surface on its own timeline. That is the cleanest form of revenge. If someone ever asks me what I learned from losing everything at 48, I give them this answer. Loyalty is strength only when it is returned. Silence is power only when chosen. And revenge is most effective when it doesn't change our. I didn't win. I corrected. And sometimes, that's the only victory that lasts.